Hello, my name is Erin Piper, and we are going to be presenting to you a professional development session prepared for teachers in our building. And this is group 3, Neanda Andrews, Chris Holder, and myself, Erin Piper. So at the start of our professional development session, we want to make sure we introduce ourselves and then also provide the participants with an agenda. And so they will be able to see what the day will look like, what we're going to be discussing, and then what kind of activities they're going to be doing. So we also want to start with giving our participants learning objectives. We want to make sure that they will be able to define portfolio assessments and then how they're going to be able to use them to assess student learning. And then at the end of the session, we also want them to be able to identify one content-related learning objective where they could incorporate a student portfolio assessment. So we're going to start with an activity, and we're going to give all the participants 30 seconds to come up with as many different forms of assessment that they can identify. So for example, they might say, okay, a paper and pencil test. They might say a project, maybe an essay or some type of writing assignment. So we'd like to see how many different ways they can come up with, whether of what maybe they include in their classroom or maybe what they remember as a student. And so once that 30 seconds is over, we're going to start a discussion where we want to ask them to identify the benefits of each method, and then also maybe think about some of them that they didn't think of themselves. And so maybe if somebody talked about a portfolio assessment, maybe why did that one not come to mind? And so we want them to start thinking about different methods and then how those different methods could relate to student abilities and maybe student weaknesses. And so we want to be able to incorporate those in the classroom.
Okay, so what are portfolio assessments? Portfolio assessments, it's a form of an assessment for learners, and it is an alternative to the classroom test. A portfolio assessment, it will contain samples of the learner's work. A portfolio assessment will show growth, and it will track the student's progress over time. So as they're completing the portfolio, they're showing what they have done from beginning and to the end, and it should show the students' growth and track their progress over time in that portfolio. The portfolio assessment, it also highlights long-term achievement and specific accomplishments. So in that portfolio, the student and the teacher and the parent are able to see those achievements and those accomplishments that the student has done in the classroom. And it's able to be communicated to the parents.
All right, so looking at portfolios versus other assessments. First of all, you get a reflection with this. So students get to reflect on their work. And it's not just, hey, I finished it, I turned it in, never worry about it again. They can look back, they can identify their strengths, their weaknesses. All right, those weaknesses can then become goals to work on for the next project or just for the next kind of learning objective. Also, you're looking at quality versus quantity. All right, you want to show the best of everything, not just, hey, look at all this work I've done and stack it up to the ceiling, but it's the best that represents the best of what the student has done, showing how much they've grown in the time period. All right, the learning objectives, it could be an assessment of work, is referenced to learning objectives and goals. So you get reflection and learning objectives, and that's going to be more valuable than just a standard paper and pencil test.
Okay, so we need to talk about scoring rubrics. How are we going to look at a student's work and either assign them a grade or provide them feedback? And so we have to look at why are they even necessary? So again, we need to understand what this portfolio is assessing. So we need to clearly outline the student expectations. So when a student is given a portfolio assessment to complete, they need to completely understand what they are required to do and what we expect of them. So we need to minimize the arbitrariness of our judgments. So it needs to be very clear what they are to give us and what we are expecting of them. And then this also allows us to hold learners to a high standard. And so like Neanda was saying, if they're tracking their progress over time, they can see what they're doing great, what maybe they need to work on, And then the teacher can also provide some feedback for that. So it might take a long time to build a rubric because you want the students to understand how they will be graded. And we want them to know what it looks like. If you're scoring them between a 1 and a 4, we want them to really understand what a 1 would look like or what a 4 would look like. So it might take a lot of time in the beginning, but it's going to save you time in the long run as far as grading the portfolio and providing them feedback. So the more work you do on the front end, it's going to really help you once you assign the student a grade. And so the student sees that their work is going to become more streamlined.
Okay. In the short video that I will show, the professor is going to talk about how the portfolio assessment can equal to greater student success. The student success comes from being able to reflect on their own work and to be able to look at that portfolio and see where they've come and see where they're going, and being able to reflect on that process of what they've been able to do, and using that rubric as a guideline for their success.
Right, I know some of you guys are probably thinking, oh man, I got to come up with a rubric. That's going to take a lot of time. And yeah, you're right, it could. But remember, you don't always have to reinvent the wheel. Chances are, if you spend a little time with Google, you can find somebody who's done an awesome job already. This one actually comes from Zane State College, and it's a rubric for portfolio-based credit. So if you look on here, it's got all the ratings down there. It's got sources of learning, demonstration of learning, evidence of learning, mastered knowledge and skills, reflection, presentation, and then it's got an overall, and you've got the 0, 1, 2, and 3. And then of course the next page over here on the right, it explains what everything means. So if you're interested in getting a copy of this, it is available on the reference page. And I'm not going to go ahead and read to people with a college education. You all can pull it up at your leisure, all right?
This is a great tool if you're new to portfolio assessments and maybe you just don't know where to start. If you can find an example somewhere, that'd be a great jumping off place and at least get you started. So, okay, so how do portfolio assessments tie into a student's cumulative grade? So you need to identify how you're going to grade the portfolio in the sense of, is it going to be analytical or holistic? So are you going to grade each criterion individually, or are you going to give them a grade for the overall portfolio? So again, that's going to depend on your preference. Maybe the other types of grades you're looking at in their cumulative grade, it may depend on the content. If you're looking at one of the 4 subjects, or if you're looking at maybe an art class or something like that, or maybe a writing class. So it just depends on the content, but that is something that you're going to want to decide so that you can determine how this form of assessment is going to play into your cumulative grade.
Okay, portfolio conferences. So after the student has done all their work and have put their portfolio together, and the teacher has assisted them in putting it together, there will be a portfolio conference, and the teacher and the parent will come together with the student. And most of the time, the portfolio conference, it is student-led. The student will lead the way as far as showing and telling what is in that portfolio, what he or she has done, and what progress that he or she has made. As I stated, the portfolio conference, it will include the student, the parent, and the teacher. And that conference will be a review of the school year, the semester, or the unit. It just depends on what time frame that the teacher and the student and the parent has decided to come together to view that portfolio. It's a nice culminating effect to see how a student has grown from the first day all the way to the last day of school, to look at that work in that portfolio. And I'm sure that it makes the student proud and makes the parent proud of what they have done and what growth they have shown throughout that unit, semester, or the school year. So it could be any time frame. It would be just based on what works best for the parent, student, and the teacher for that portfolio conference.
Some things to keep in mind. Most parts of the portfolio have been graded individually. So if it's a collection of tests and writings and stuff, that's been graded already. So you might not necessarily want to regrade them again. The big thing to remember about portfolios is they're intended to be measurements of deep understanding and genuine achievement. So basically you're looking at a whole picture of a student, not just one little snapshot in time, but maybe, again, like we said earlier, over a unit, over a semester, or even over a school year.
In a professional development session, it might be even helpful to picture certain kids who maybe have some test anxiety or don't perform well in tests, but can typically show their mastery in other ways. So that might be a good idea, is to have these students picture a certain child and maybe see how they would do with something like this to show their understanding. Okay, so some more things to keep in mind. Things that could possibly negatively affect the validity of the portfolio. So you want to make sure that what you're assessing is actually clearly represented to the students. And so there should be, again, the expectation should be clear. And then within the portfolio, it's important to require a variety of products. So again, we all have different abilities and students have different talents. And so we want them to be able to show that through a variety of products. With the rubrics, you want to make sure that you include criteria for individual entries and the portfolio as a whole. And so again, students need to know what the rubric looks like ahead of time. And like Chris said, that may take you a while to develop that, but it's going to be worth it. And the students are going to be able to clearly understand that and know what their grading process is going to look like. And then the relevance, you want to make sure that you don't demand abilities outside of the ones that you're intending to assess. So the last thing we want to do is take an assessment form like this and maybe give some students, worry or anxiety or nervousness about, other things that we might say we're going to assess. And so whatever we are going to assess, they need to know that up front. And then it needs to directly tie to a learning objective.
Okay, so we've talked about portfolio assessments. We've talked about what's in them. We've talked about rubrics. We've talked about their purpose. So your next question could be, so what does it look like? What does a portfolio assessment look like? In this short video, it's the educator, the teacher. She is going to show you an example of one of her students' portfolio in her classroom. Now, will everybody's portfolio assessments look the same? No, they won't, because it could vary by grade level, it could vary by content area, but overall, they all serve the same purpose for that assessment for the portfolio. It should show the student's work, and it should be content specific, and it should show the student's growth from that semester or that unit or the year. So here you go. You can take a look at the video and it will show you what does a portfolio look like.
All right, so here's a rubric for our presentation. We talked earlier about, how to set up a rubric, but you want to make sure it's content specific. So this is specific to what we just did. So hopefully we gave you a good introduction. You're going to want to continue to maybe study some more about portfolio rubrics. Hopefully the activity got you intrigued, and hopefully our length of presentation wasn't too long that you weren't compelled to check your phone or send emails or anything else, and you were just able to enjoy an educational opportunity here at this faculty meeting. So thank you.
Thank you.
And if you need any of the references or any of the resources, the videos, the scoring rubrics, you can find them on this page.